So I'm Dr. Gary, and I'm your coach, and you're involved in my mission-centric ministry coaching program. I just wanted to give you a coaching tip. You heard Louise talk about silencing your cell phone, and so don't do that. Don't silence your cell phone. What you need to do is you need to make the interruption, you need to spiritualize it. In other words, when the cell phone rings, you know, it's annoying, but if you can make it spiritual, then it'd be okay, right? And the one way to make a cell phone that is an interruption and annoyance a sacred event is that if you assess a $100 penalty fee for when the cell phone goes off, then we can welcome the experience, right? Because it's really for us. Anyway, okay, that's just a tip. So, have you ever wondered why the things that we really, really want in our life are so hard to get, but yet the things that we don't want seem to find us? Have you ever had that experience? And I think that it should be the other way around, shouldn't it? Shouldn't it be that our purpose and passion should just draw into our life just exactly what we need, and we rarely come into contact with stuff that we don't want or don't like? And so I'm wanting to explain why it is that it's so hard for us to manifest what our hopes and dreams are, but yet trouble finds us really easy. Okay, and so I'm wanting to share a concept with you, and bless you. We're going to be looking at whether or not you're above or below the line, and so you don't want to get this incorrect, you see. It's either or, so you're either above the line or not, and in a moment I'm going to ask, where are you? And you just need to know that you have to get it right. Now, see, in Unity, we don't guilt people out. We use performance anxiety. So do you feel a little tension, a little stress around getting this right? Anybody? Because you see, that's our human nature. We're kind of geared towards, having to get it right, because the penalty for not getting it right kind of lands on us like this, like there's something the matter with us, And so here we go. How many of you are above the line? Raise your hand. Okay, and how many of you are below the line right now? Raise your hand. Oh, great, wonderful. Well, let me define what I mean by above and below the line, and then we'll retake the survey. Hang on a second. And so let us just say, for sake of definition, that if you're above the line, we can say that you're open. All right, and so if it's either or, if you're below the line, you are. Okay, very good. You're catching on. This is great. Okay, so if you're, for instance, reactive, what would you say would be above the line behavior? Kind of responding maybe? Feel the energy difference? Okay. So, and let's just say, what if you are in this behavior? No one here is ever in this behavior. Have you ever needed to be right before? Raise your hand. It's just a fur ball. Cough it up. Okay? All right, so what would above the line be? All right, so let's try this one on. If below the line is needing to be right, above the line is your needing to be right doesn't make me wrong. Okay? You feel that difference? So how many of you have ever reacted to someone's judgment or criticism? Raise your hand. Okay. If our reaction is down here, our defensiveness, when someone judges us, what would be above the line behavior? It'd be, tell me more. Tell me more. Anybody read, like, The Eye of the Storm? The book, The Eye of the Storm? Are you familiar with it? It's Unity's best-selling book. It sells more than even Lessons in Truth. The Eye of the Storm by Dr. Gary Simmons. Check it out. It's capital I. Here, I'll write it down for you. Eye of the storm. Okay. All right, so if you sourced your discomfort where outside of yourself, where are you? Below the line. If you source your well-being outside of yourself, where are you? Very good. Good. And so we're wanting to understand that there is a distinction between how we're being with what we're having, depending upon where we are in our way of being with what we're having. It could be said that if we're below the line, we are having our life as if it's against us, because these are the behaviors that demonstrate we're pushing something away. And if we're above the line, then we're having our life as if it's for us. And there's a different way of being in the dynamic of what's happening in our world when we're above the line, you see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a short movie that explains this in much more detail. And I think it's going to reveal quite a lot to you. And I want you, as you experience this video, just to pay attention to what it brings up for you. And this video comes from an organization called the Conscious Leadership Group, and the video is called Location, Location, Location. Location, location, location. And then you can Google or you can go on YouTube after you've subscribed to your YouTube channel. Just type in the search location, 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 conscious leadership group, and you'll get a copy of this short video. And then I want you to send it to as many people as you believe are below the line, because it's your way of helping them. I'll show you, because after this video, you're going to see how this can transform someone's life that you know is below the line right now. Are you ready? Okay, let's see if this works. Try this again. Nope, that's not it. No, that's not it. Here we go. Nope.
One question that conscious leaders ask themselves over and over is, where am I? To support leaders in locating themselves as they ask the question, where am I? We offer this tool, a line, a simple black line. At any moment, all leaders and all people are either above the line or below the line. Our location describes how we're being with what is occurring in our life right now. If we're above the line, we are open, curious, and committed to learning. If we are below the line, we are closed, defensive, and committed to being right. Stop right now and simply ask yourself, where am I? In this now moment, am I above the line or below the line? Typically, when people are below the line, they believe certain things about the world. For example, they believe there is not enough. It could be that there's not enough money, or time, or space, or energy, or love. People below the line also believe that their story about the situation is right. People below the line also believe that there is a threat out there. Something or someone is threatening their desire for approval, control, or security. And people below the line see the situation as serious. The deeper below the line they are, the more serious things look. People below the line tend to behave certain ways as well. They tend to cling to an opinion, find fault and blame, gossip, explain, rationalize and justify, get overwhelmed, and avoid conflict or pursue conflict for the sake of winning. When people are above the line, they believe that learning and growing are more important than being right. They believe that all people and circumstances are their allies, here for their growth. They believe that from a distance, almost everything is funny. People above the line live in curiosity, listen deeply, speak unarguably, question all their beliefs, and live a life of play. Now, knowing what you know about being above or below the line, where are you? One thing to know as you consider this question. We are hardwired to go below the line. Literally, our brain is programmed to perceive threat, and when it does, a chemical cocktail courses through our veins, and we go below the line. This reaction was designed to help us survive in the presence of a real threat to our physical survival. An issue for modern-day leaders is that often our brains can't tell the difference between a threat to our physical survival and a threat to our ego or identity. We react and get defensive when we experience a threat to our ego. So in many ways, being below the line is natural and normal. But when we are below the line, we're not in a state, literally brain state, of high creativity, collaboration, innovation, and relational connection. We're simply trying to survive. Leaders today can't thrive if they're in survival mode. So the first activity of conscious leadership is location, location, location. In this now moment, where am I? Telling ourselves and others the truth about our current location begins the great conversation.
All right. So, can you see why you should send this off to some folks? All right, but before you do, let's kind of get more into this a little bit. So, how many of you have been through the Q process? A lot of you, okay? So you already know that when you're below the line, you're functioning out of your shadow, your sense of not enough, your all those limiting beliefs. I'm not good enough, I don't measure up, you name it. But when you're above the line, you're being who you've come here to be. So this is another way of understanding that we're either on one side of the card or the other. We're either above the line or we're not. But the issue is not so much where we are, the issue is when we recognize that we're below the line, what are we going to do? Okay, so most of the time when we're below the line, it feeds an energy like needing to be right. We don't give up needing to be right until we realize what needing to be right is connected to. It's connected to your inadequacy, your sense of not enough. When we react to someone's judgment and criticism, our reaction is below the line too. And yet if we know that someone's judgment or criticism is not about us, but for us, and how could someone's judgment be for us? Well, when we're above the line, we recognize that someone's judgment is about what's missing for them, or what the relationship needs, or about what we might have said or did that might have created some kind of disconnect. In any sense, we can welcome whatever judgment might come in our direction just by saying, say more about that. And what's the bad thing that could happen after that? They judge you more? No, it'll finally land itself on something that's really authentic. A person, when you say, tell me more, when they're judging you, will get above the line. And we can do that for people. We can really make a difference in our world just by helping people take this journey. Sound like a good thing to be doing for us? Now let's just look at this kind of picture, and it helps us map out what's going on in the world. Can we not see what's happening in the world is below the line dynamics? And what about politics? Okay, where are the Democrats and the Republicans? Way below the line, okay. Well, and so we can look at what's going on in the world. We can see how below the line our government is, our healthcare is, our educational systems, all the kinds of things that involve people and relationships tend to gravitate below the line when we live in the context of separation, when we believe that we're separate from each other. When we're above the line, it's interconnected. Interbeing is up here. The web of life is up here. This is separation, being alone, being victim. We're having our life as if it's against us. Above the line, everything's for us. And so when we recognize that the quality of our life is determined from the inside out, not the outside in, then we begin to dial back our tendency to try to have things be a certain way in the outer. Because when we have to have things be a certain way, we're below the line. When we're above the line, the field of infinite possibilities is our playground. And so as we begin to shift and understand that this is the dynamic that we want to kind of recognize, this is what the issue is with the world, and we can make a difference just by our getting above the line and not playing in this, this briar patch. So, part of taking responsibility for what gets created when we live below the line is taking ownership, right? And in a moment, I'm going to talk about the legacy that gets created when we live in a society that makes routine below-the-line behavior normal, as opposed to something that we have to address. And so owning our life is something that is important to us, but we need to recognize that when we react to something, our reaction is our life. Your reaction is your life. And who wants to have a life that's built around insecurity or blame or judgment or scarcity or struggle? But when we own our life, this is the life above the line that we want to welcome and engage. But the challenge is that we don't know how to get ourselves above the line. It's not easy because we're conditioned to be below the line. Our brain is hardwired to be below the line. We have a structure in the brain called the amygdala. And it would rather be wrong 99% of the time than miss the one time it failed to protect us. So consequently, we are driven to kind of look out at the world and see the glass half empty. We have a negativity bias that's a part of our human nature. But in understanding our spiritual nature and understanding that we have to recognize the dimension in ourselves that is not of this world, we have to recognize that above the line living is what we're called to as a part of being on a spiritual journey. You know, when Jesus says, the Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom, when we're below the line, we can't receive the kingdom. We can only receive it above the line. We're out of phase when we're below the line, with a dimension of ourself that is there to serve the greater good, and we're a part of that. So our effort to kind of overcome the below-the-line behavior is to recognize what the effort must be if we're to extricate ourselves from that dynamic. So brain research and science suggests that 95% of our behavior is unconscious. And it's unconscious because we're run by the circuitry of our unconscious self system. In other words, there's an aspect of our body-mind dynamic that is conditioned. And when it's conditioned and when we live in the habits, there's $100. When we live in the habits of, we have people whip out their $100 right when it happens. So when we live in the awareness and when we don't understand that we have conditioned within us habits of being, habits of unconscious doing, habits of having our life against us, habits of feeling diminished, habits of believing that we're not enough, habits of making up stories that explain why we can't take ownership and responsibility. When we recognize that this is a systemic dimension of us, we can reboot it, we can step out of it, we can shift, we can get above the line, but we have to know the practice and the how-to in order for that to be an easy journey. So part of my effort is to really be clear about the circuits that I must rework or I must recondition if I'm going to be using my attention and awareness, my consciousness, as a tool for creating a personal reality that lives above the line. You affirmed today in the third foundation principle that we create our life experience through our thoughts. In other words, we create our own personal reality. But our own personal reality is generated by these circuits, and they are either below the line in the context of our unconscious self, or they're above the line in the context of our using our attention, awareness, and our faculties in the context of demonstrating these behaviors and these values. So if you look at these circuits, the top level is how we're having our life. And most of us have our life as if it's against us. That's our default way of being. That's what our brain wants to have as its go-to place because that's the way we can be safest. But the challenge and problem is that these behaviors are attached to that as well. And those bottom circuits are our proof, our story. And so we live in this a belief that life is this way, and therefore we're compelled to need to be right, to make somebody the matter with us. Of course, no one here does that, right? Have you ever had somebody the matter with you? Okay, good. You understand that's below the line behavior. And so when we are recognizing that when we're below the line, there is an unintended consequence for that. The unintended consequence for our below the line behavior is we get more entrenched in these dynamics. And our being engaged in the below the line dynamics causes us to be modulated by what's happening out there in the world. We begin to take in the world's stress and the world's incoherence, and we then feel it within ourselves, and then our life becomes a kind of crazy as a mirror. And so pain that's not transformed is pain that's transmitted. And when we live below the line, we're transmitting pain. And all those folks you want to send this movie to are probably you wanting that because you feel that they're in pain, or you feel that they're kind of lost within themselves, or a victim in their circumstances. Well, we need to recognize that the unintended consequence for living below the line are three habits of being. It's the habit of scarcity, the habit of judgment, and the habit of struggle. And so, let me go back to that slide for a second. So just think about it for a moment. Most individuals struggle with their sense of not enough, and therefore there's lack in their life. Most people are conditioned to find fault or source their discomfort outside of themselves, so judgment becomes the way in which we manage that dynamic. We don't want to feel it ourselves, we make somebody the matter with us. Then the habit of struggle means is that we have to somehow coax from the universe what our greater good is, and we're encumbered by all the things that are in the way. And these are unintended consequences of below-the-line behavior. And if you have any of these things in your life, it just tells you you're stuck down here. But the good news is that we have spiritual practices that can move us in this direction, like the Q process. And so when we recognize that this is a dynamic, we can make progress. Where'd that one go? What happened to my presentation? Okay, here we go. All right. So I want you to look at this again. And now I want you to, this is sort of, I work with this a lot now, and I'm wanting to share something that has been a part of my work with these principles. And so I got in touch with some of my regrets. I have a regret over how I've been below the line as a parent. Anybody have any regrets as a parent? And so this has helped me to see how I have created in my daughter's life the experience, her commitment to know that her dad will never be available for her. I've trained my daughter to be invested in the reality that I'm never going to be there for her. And this is the consequence of my below-the-line behavior as a parent. And so in doing the Q process, I had to return back to that earlier moment when I made my daughter feel like she couldn't trust her dad anymore. I was 27 years old, she was 6 or 7, and it was a pivotal moment when I could have embraced her above the line, but I didn't know about the line. All I knew about is my insecurity, my sense of not enough. And my poor little daughter had to deal with my 5 wives. Yeah, I'm really clear about my below-the-line behavior, and most of my below-the-line stuff is as a minister. I got into ministry really young. I'm almost 40 years in ministry now, and most of my ministry is below the line. And I got to tell you, to see this now changes things, and I got to say, I had to go back to my daughter. I had to go back to younger Gary, and I had to reparent my daughter in that earlier moment and give little Gary, younger Gary, a different voice to convey to Julie, my daughter, my 6-year-old. I had to be able to speak that voice that I couldn't have spoken back then. I had to begin to reparent that dimension of myself and my daughter on my timeline to restore that. And so we must travel back. That's what the Q process helps us do. It helps us reparent those aspects of ourselves that for whatever reason drove us below the line. And when we recognize that that's sort of the nature of our dynamic that is in the context of separation, we can heal those aspects of ourselves. We can reconcile those broken parts of our life that are the unintended consequences of living below the line. But we can't do that unless we are aware that above the line means that we have to begin to understand and value the journey that we've taken. And so to be given the gift of knowing that you can be above the line and having the spiritual practice to be able to do it, to be able to make that journey is one of the highest dimensional places in our evolutionary process as human beings on this planet. To evolve to a place where we no longer need to blame or shame, to no longer have a parent ever ever give to their child a sense that they're not worthy or they're not good enough. Not that they would do that on purpose, but we do that because we parent below the line. What's the most common word that a toddler hears? No, 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 that's right. But what the child does not hear is the K-N-O-W behind it. So the story with my daughter is that after I did this deeper work, I had a dream. And in that dream, I experienced a depth of reconciliation. I haven't spoken to my daughter in 17 years. I haven't seen my granddaughter in 17 years. We're totally estranged, but I'm totally connected. When I'm connected when I'm here. When I'm here, I'm guilty. I'm ashamed. I'm a disappointment. I'm not enough. When I'm up here, I care a lot. I send love. It matters to me how I show up in the world. So if our circuits, we still have these circuits, and if they're below the line, what we create is, well, I call it poop in our playground. You know, we sort of are doing it to ourselves. But when we recognize that above the line just means that we have to use these circuits differently. We have to extricate ourselves out of our unconscious habits of being, doing, having, feeling, believing, and perceiving. We have to extricate the way in which we use story to keep us bound to the conditions and circumstances, the events and circumstances of our life, rather than using our story to unleash us into a different pattern in our life. And so, if we consider those habits, the habits of scarcity, struggle, and judgment, then there are antidotes. The antidotes are above the line, but we have to be in spiritual practice. And there is a broader context for this work. It's called the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leaders, and that'll be a book study that I'm going to invite your leadership to engage, because part of the journey of a spiritual community is learning together how to be above the line. Because we all come together for a message that lifts us, but the lifting has to be up here, not making it okay to stay down here. Because when I was a minister, it was okay for me to react to people's judgments. I could have board members against me. I could have congregants against me. But when I'm up here, they're all my allies. They're my partners. And so when we live above the line, we use whatever we have as our abundance. And so imagine having a terminal illness like stage 4 metastatic melanoma like I had 3 years ago. And so we can either be with that below the line or above the line. And so I welcomed it. I welcomed it because it enabled me to heal a dimension of myself, not just the physical part, but the part of me that created the disease to begin with. You know, and so there's nothing that we cannot use to move ourself into a greater experience of who and what we've come here to be. But we have to have a practice. We have to work against the inertia of living in this life. It's as if we've grown up in a house that only had 5-foot ceilings. Imagine such a thing. When you're a little kid, it doesn't matter, but eventually you grow up to a point where you come up against a limit, and if you don't know that the limit's artificial, then you live your life as if this is your truth. And then you finally find Spiritual Life Center or a place like this, and you realize that people are walking up like this, and there's a whole different way of being, and you try to get above the line, and you step up, but everything in you pulls you back down because this is what we're used to. So this is the effort. We're going to have to be able to stretch and feel the discomfort that this creates, because it can be scary when we first jump up here. But when we know that our body is trying to pull us back, it's the circuits, it's the bottom line circuits that are pulling us back. But we have to maintain the effort to lift us up. And the effort to lift us up are these 3 different habits. Here we go. The habit of gratitude, the habit of self-compassion, and the habit of presence. And so regardless of what you're dealing with, if you recognize, oh, I'm below the line, then you pick one of these practices with what you're having. So if I'm caught up in judgment and I'm making somebody the matter with me, I have to recognize what that's coming from and then give myself compassion, because I need to recognize and see that my judgment out there is really I need to find it within me and forgive it. Right? And I can't do that work without being in the habit of self-compassion. If I'm dealing with not enough, I have to be in the attitude of gratitude. I have to begin to welcome whatever I'm having, even if what I'm having is against me, because I can use whatever I'm having as my abundance if I'm above the line. And when I have gratitude, that pulls me above the line. And when I'm in any kind of struggle, and if I'm trying to force something to happen, if I just become present and welcome in the moment, I will understand that the universe is for me and will bring me into a relationship with what the very next step on my journey must be. And it may still look and feel as if it's against me, but if I'm above the line, I welcome it. I say, bring it on. And this gives us power. This gives us hope. We can make a difference just by recognizing that it's above or below the line. And I'm going to end this. It's our custom at Unity Spiritual Center, Spokane, that we have small group ministries happening year-round. It's called Spirit Groups. And each lesson that my wife or I do, we give you homework. And so here's your assignment, to be in this discernment process. What behaviors, attitudes, and ways of being are you below the line with? So you need to do an inventory about just what's going on with you, so you can kind of own, okay, this is real. I'm below the line. And as you reflect upon your life, what relationships have been impacted by being below the line? Okay, so all your regrets, all the things that take you into some sense of not enough in your life, you have to understand that that's an effect. That's a systemic dimension of ourselves. It's conditioned. It's not the truth of us. We took on things because we didn't have the context to do so otherwise. But if we don't understand that our reaction to our life is our life, then we'll be trying to negotiate what's happening in the outer, as opposed to move out of reaction and into being present. And so what might change if you would be able to routinely be above the line? Just begin to hold yourself into this place that I can do this. This is something that I can do. I just have to retrain the circuits. I have to recondition my body, mind, to a different consciousness that lives above the line. And then finally, what helps you to realize that you're relating to your life from below the line? Well, your uncomfortable feelings that are going to be a big clue. And then the story that you make up around those uncomfortable feelings will give you a sense of how deep you are and how entrenched you are. So the talk is really not over, but I'm done speaking. The next dimension of the experience of above or below the line will happen in just a few moments. Thank you so much for your attention.
You're the one. You got to be proactive all the time. There are some days when I feel we lose our minds. Don't know why. Stay above the line.
Showing our actions all the time to be successful and to really shine. And yet sometimes we slip and slide and we're not fine. Don't stop and whine. Stay above the
line. Watch our
pursuit closely all the time, so that our vision and our goals will be aligned. When SLC is successful, it's a sign that we don't whine. Stay above the line.
Woo!